Well, hi everyone, it's Rusty here again. And if you ever gone hiking with someone else, as an experienced hiker, that's one thing. But if somebody has to go along with you and they have no experience, then you've just taken on the responsibility of getting a hiker off to a good start. So today I'm going to talk about two different case studies. One where I failed miserably to do it right, and another one where I was a little more successful. Stay tuned. Before I get into the two case studies that I want to go over, I want you to consider this. In 2006, a famous Tour de France winner ran his first marathon, and he did it in under 3 hours, 2:59:56. That's a credible time. But I put it into a age race calculator, and it told me basically that this was a regional class performance. It certainly wasn't a world class performance. Now, this was one of the most successful Tour de France bikers ever. How he got there, I know that's a bit of controversy. That's really not pertinent to the point here. But the point is, he was the best at biking, but mediocre. I mean, I wouldn't say mediocre, regional class at best at the marathon, his first marathon. Does that mean that runners are actually better athletes than bikers? Well, it doesn't mean that at all, because I'm sure if you took a marathon runner and put him on a bike and had him compete in the Tour de France, they would be fortunate to get a regional class performance out of it. The point of this is that different physical endeavors take different conditioning and different training, and being good at one probably does mean you're capable of being good at the other, but it doesn't mean that you automatically are simply by getting off a bike and starting to run, or getting off the road and hopping onto a bike. It just doesn't work like that. So it's the same thing with hiking. So just keep that in mind. So in case study one, I want to talk about Devo. Now, Devo was a well-trained distance runner. He was past retirement age, so consider the age factor in there. But he was physically fit for a man his age. And he asked me if he could go along on a hike. He really wanted to hike the Long Trail in Vermont. I think he was born in Vermont and just wanted to kind of have that knocked off his bucket list, which was an end-to-end hike of the Long Trail. Now, that is a 3-week commitment, approximately, at least for people our age. And it's 273 miles. Now, this was going to be his first long-distance hike. Well, I didn't have the time. I had just started a new job, and I didn't really have the time off to go 270 miles. But we figured, great, I'll do 90 miles. And, that just seemed so much easier anyway, So we planned on doing the 90 miles. Well, as it turned out, he went 7 miles before he had to stop, and I think it was his pack was way too heavy, and that caused him to twist an ankle very early in the hike. As a matter of fact, I don't even think we were actually on the trail yet. We were on the approach trail. We started up at the Canadian border. The Long Trail goes north to south, Canadian border down to the Massachusetts border. And it is very tough up north. It's like being in the White Mountains. It's the Green Mountains, but it's as tough as hiking parts of Maine and parts of New Hampshire. So the bottom line is, I really feel that it was my fault that we started out with all these great enthusiasm, and he ended up only doing 7 miles. I did continue on. After 50 miles, I had to stop, not for any physical reasons, but I was needed at home, as it turned out. So here are the errors that we made. First, we fell into that biker runner fallacy. You're in good shape from some physical activity, you're ready to hike long distances. Error number 2 was anchoring, and that's what I was referring to. It's a thought process that gets us into trouble. And that's what I was referring to when I talked about, we had started out talking about 270 miles. So when we knocked it back to 90, it sounded really easy. You know, shame on me. I wasn't quite as experienced as I am now, but shame on me for not recognizing that 90 miles for a beginner for a first hike is really not that reasonable, especially when you talk about people in their 60s. So we had anchored on the 270 value. If we had started talking about 10 and then said 90, we'd say, whoa, that sounds hard. So that was error number 2. Error number 3 was we just went out to the Canadian border, took the approach trail up to the border, and we didn't have any training or shakedown hikes. I never gave him that opportunity. Error number 4, I already referred to. His pack weight was way too heavy. I think it was in the 40-45 pound range. And I still see that out on the trail today. I hiked with a guy briefly down in Southern Virginia, right outside of Roanoke, and he must have had a 50-pound pack, and he was out there only for a few days, and he had to keep on offloading every trail crossing some of his equipment where he'd come back and pick it up later. So you've really got to pay attention to pack weight. And then also, we were trying for too many miles per day. This 90 miles was going to be done in from a weekend in a week, and then the following weekend, that's 9 days. That's 10 miles a day, which sounds reasonable, but it's really not when you're up there in the Green Mountains with a novice hiker. So that was basically why it was a failure. Now the next time someone asked was Crazy Boonies, and I decided to start hiking together. Now she is in her mid-30s. She is well conditioned from a landscaping business. But we started out, I learned my lesson with Devo, and we started out by doing day hikes. And then we had a hike with my son and his girlfriend and Crazy Boonies here, and we set up what I call a base camp situation at Mount Monadnock, where we had our tents, we slept out overnight, but our hike was a day hike over Mount Monadnock. I mean, I happened to carry a full pack because I was in training for a longer hike, but for the rest of us, it was just a hike up to the top of the mountain and back down, and then camp out. And then finally, we did go on a 20-mile, 2-day loop in the Green Mountains, and this is what this training had prepared both of us for. So here's the mistakes that I didn't make. I didn't fall for the biker-runner fallacy, or I should probably call it the hiker-runner fallacy, or in this case, the hiker-landscaper fallacy. I didn't assume that being in good physical condition to do one activity was actually preparing for this other one. We didn't fixate on a particular mileage. In other words, we didn't fall victim to this anchoring thing. We didn't say, hey, 100 miles would be great, so let's start out by doing 20. That's not what happened. We avoided that mistake. We did do the day and the shakedown hikes like I talked about. We did the day hikes with day packs, and then we did the overnighter in Mount Monadnock where we had a camp already established. We kept the pack weights reasonable. I would say that when we did that 20-miler, Crazy Boonies' pack was probably around 20 pounds, and that's fairly reasonable for a first hike, for a first overnight, full backpacking hike for somebody. And we built up to that 10 miles per day. 10 miles a day, for an experienced hiker might not sound like much, but when I get out on the trail, like my first long section hike of the year, if you looked at my Lash videos, Lash being the long section hike recap, I was only doing 9 miles each day my first couple of days. I didn't start hitting my stride until well over probably a week and a half into the hike. And then I was starting hitting the 18 to 20 mile days. But that's something you have to build up to. And if you think of it in terms of that, your first 2 days out on the trail, you're probably not doing your full, whatever your full mileage is. So why would you expect a newcomer to do that? So here are the lessons. Start small and remember that you, as the experienced hiker, are a mentor and a coach. Okay? You've got to make enjoyment the goal. And the ways to do that are to, keep the pack weight down, keep the mileage down, pick an interesting hike, and schedule around the weather. There's no point in going out. I mean, we know if you do long distance hiking, yes, you're going to deal with rain, you're going to deal with cold nights, But try avoiding that when you've got a new hiker. You want to hook them in. If they're really interested in hiking, you want them to enjoy it. And it's actually kind of hard to enjoy a hike when you're exhausted or you've been rained on all day. Now, those of us who do the longer section hikes or the through hikes, you're going to be out there for a month at a time. My longest was 40 days. Yeah, there were bad days and good days, but overall, even the bad days I could enjoy for their contrast to the good days, I guess. And also, you can't expect a new person to have the best equipment. And I'm not saying you should have two sets of equipment, the tip-top, ultra lightweight equipment. But if you can make some of the equipment available to them, because they may not turn out to like hiking no matter how enjoyable you make it, so they can't really go into the expense. But if you have an extra tent, provide it. If you have a sleeping bag and a pad, provide it to the other person. Now, there's something I couldn't do for Crazy Boonies that I'm going to have to find some way to do. She had to actually sleep in the sleeping bag in a tent, but on the ground with no sleeping pad. Fortunately, it was a grassy spot that we were able to pitch on in this last hike, but before that we were on a tent platform, and she was basically sleeping on a wooden floor. So that's no fun. So I may pick up a second sleeping pad just so that when I do bring somebody, whether it's Crazy Boonies or somebody else with me, that they can sleep in better comfort. You may even provide a pack. I have a second lightweight pack, so I provided that to her. And then, especially early on when you're doing the, maybe only one overnight, provide the shared water purification, cooking, the stove, just be able, in first aid kit, that sort of thing. Just be prepared to kind of take on the things you carry with you, but it's no extra to share it with one other person. Your water filter, there's no extra cost other than maybe the number of liters you put through it, but there's no extra real cost to carrying sharing the water filter in that case. And the same thing with the stove. Yeah, you have to bring enough fuel, but if you use the little canisters, you probably have enough anyway. So those are the lessons I got. And I guess the big one is just remember, when you bring a new person out on the trail, that it's kind of your responsibility to truly mentor them and to, I hate to say break them in, but to make it an enjoyable experience so that they can build into maybe doing some of the things that you were doing. Just, I guess, try to remember what it was like for you your first time out on the trail. Thanks for listening.